Because
that in the far vehicle as well, that was trying to turn around, they just unasked and ran.
Yeah, the vehicle behind the 4Runner, everybody.
TD Mount.
Yep.
I guess they have the same thoughts about being in vehicles as we do. Like, let's get out of this thing. It's about to become a bullet sponge.
And those vehicles were stuck. They were all stuck.
Right.
And in hindsight, there were, maybe a couple of those Vics were filled with insurgents, and all the rest of them were just fucking innocent people who were trying to get through the HK around this site of the ambush that had just been unleashed up on Diamond, right? So they weren't going to try and drive through that thing. So they were just trying to bounce around through the village to carry on with their life's business. And, stuck in the middle of them were a couple of Vics with insurgents in them. And a correction on Mike's terminology in the book. What we discovered later was by the 17th, 3 days later, when the battle for Husayba kicked off, was that this guy wasn't Iraqi. He was a foreign fighter. Yeah. And they had infiltrated through Syria by the hundreds to kick off an offensive across the entire province. Yep. They were there to fight.
Yeah. So, continuing on, the Iraqi, which again, as you just pointed out, this guy is a foreign fighter from any number of countries, wrapped his left arm around the back of Dunham's neck and cocked his right arm to punch the corporal in the face. Dunham caught the man's fist to block the swing. The two stumbled toward the Land Cruiser. Dunham pulled his right knee up and drove it into the Iraqi's stomach. The Iraqi doubled over from the blow, and the men fell to the ground in an angry embrace. Miller's brother, a sheriff's deputy in California, had bought Kelly a telescoping police baton and shipped it to Iraq. Miller didn't really think he'd ever need it, but he liked the idea of having one and kept it in a holster zip-tied to his flak vest. Up until that point, Miller used it mostly to fend off stray dogs. But as he ran around the front of the SUV toward Dunham and the Iraqi, again foreign fighter, he pulled the baton out and snapped it down to his side to extend it to its full length. Miller saw the Iraqi lying on his back, his head toward the rear of the Land Cruiser. Dunham was face down on top of him, torso rotated slightly counterclockwise. Miller planted his left knee in the Iraqi's ribs. Bracing his left hand on Dunham's back, he slammed the butt of the baton as hard as he could into the Iraqi's forehead. The blow was so sharp that the metal baton collapsed back into itself. Miller was amazed the man was still conscious, much less still fighting. He drove the baton into the Iraqi's forehead again, then jabbed it into the left side of the man's neck, a blood choke he had been told would pinch off circulation to the brain through the carotid artery. Lance Corporal Hampton saw the melee and charged around the van and up the street, his adrenaline surging. All he could hear was the loud pounding of his own pulse as he searched for an open shot on the Iraqi to hit. Shoot him in the head, he said to himself. He aimed his rifle, but worried that any shot might go through the Iraqi and hit Miller. Hell, he thought, I'll muzzle thump him. Marines are taught to poke their rifle barrels into the eyes of their enemies to make sure they're dead. Only the dead or comatose could resist flinching when poked hard in the eye with a long piece of metal. The muzzle thump could also be delivered to the chest to get someone aggressive to back off without resorting to deadly force. Hampton planned to thump the Iraqi in the temple. If it knocked him out, fine. If it killed him, that was fine with Bill, too. Hampton picked out a spot on the wriggling Iraqi's temple and pulled his rifle back to get some force behind it.
Is that right, Bill? You were shaking your head.
I was gonna put that thing through his head. I was put it through his eye.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna put it through his temple. I was going right here, and I was just gonna go right here and try and push that rifle back out this way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hairy. The grappling situation when that's going down and you have a weapon and you're one of your guys is grappling with an insurgent. That's a tough shot to take. Because it's not like a movie where the bad guy's holding the hostage still. because this is a fight that's going on, and you know anything can happen at any point. And the other thing is, I mean, you guys are. You got to think. You know, I'd be thinking to myself, okay, well, this guy didn't shoot us. He didn't blow us up. So how do we know this guy's armed or not? That's another question that can be going through your head. I'm sure people sit back and say, "Oh, I'll just kill him." Yeah, that's something that is a decision that's getting made. But when your first instinct in that situation, you got your buddy on top of him. You don't know if the guy's armed. There's a lot of things going on to just start unloading your weapon. And that's why I'm thinking both you guys are thinking, well, you're kind of got the thought in your mind, I'll shoot this guy, and you guys, but both of you are going non-lethal at this point in time.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just trying, like, my thought process was if I hit him hard enough, I'd knock him out. I mean, I'm hitting him with a metal baton, and I hit him the first time, and he was still struggling. So I came in for the second one, and at that time, you could see that I had split his forehead wide open and fractured his skull, and he was still fighting. And so I was like, okay, I need to do something different. And I always remember in boot camp they talk about the blood choke. Mm-hmm. So I just started to put pressure across his carotid with all my weight. And then by then I think Bill had just when I started to apply the choke, that's when Bill had come up. And that's when the rest happened, which we'll get to.
Yeah, you know, again, for young people in any employment like this, whether you're a cop or you're a soldier, you're a Marine, whatever situation you're in, well, this is one thing that we learned. There's this idea that when you hit someone, if you hit them hard enough, they're going to get knocked out. And we learned this over and over again that it's not true. And there's a chance when you hit someone, you can knock them out. But there's a chance that they don't get knocked out. One of my assistant platoon commander entered a room. We were taking down a building, and there was a combative insurgent in there. And, you know, we had learned muzzle strike, you know, muzzle strike to the face. It'll knock him out for sure. It may kill him, so you got to be a little bit careful, whatever. My assistant platoon commander did the hardest muzzle strike I think a person could. He took a running start of about 8 yards and fully cocked back his weapon and then drove it into this guy's head. And it deflected a little bit, like around the brow, and carved out a big, giant chunk of his scalp. No factor. The guy, he was bleeding like a stuck pig, but he kept fighting. So, all that's going on. And here we go back to the book. While Dunham, Miller, and Hampton wrestled with the Iraqi, Sergeant Reynolds, the sniper, told Sanders to provide cover in case the Iraqi had friends around. So Sanders was more than a dozen yards away from the fight when he heard Dunham yell a warning. No, no, no. Watch his hand. Hampton heard nothing except the beating of his own heart. But he caught a fleeting glimpse of Dunham's helmet on the ground next to the Iraqi. Dunham was on his stomach with his arms outstretched in front of him and wrapped around the sides of his helmet as if he were holding it down on top of something. Then came the explosion. Bill Hampton saw a flash of light, but the explosion didn't sound very loud to him. His vision blurred, and he knew that something had happened to him. He just didn't know what. His first thought was whether his teeth had been hit. He ran his tongue along them and was relieved to find them all in place, but his face, leg, and arm leaked red. The concussion had broken his nose. One tiny metal fragment hit him under the nostrils, and another embedded itself in his top lip. A piece of shrapnel about the size of a pen tip had hit him in the right knuckle. Several shards of metal hit him in the left arm and left leg. One piece hit a bone in his forearm, broke up, and opened an inch-wide hole as it exited. Another traveled up his arm and cut its way out the middle of his elbow, leaving an X-shaped tear, then lodged in his bicep. He remembered that slowing his breathing would slow the bleeding, and he tried to do so. He staggered against the cinder block wall and back toward the intersection. He couldn't lift his rifle with his left arm, so he held it in his right by the trigger guard and pistol grip, trying to keep an eye out for enemy fighters. A boom and a flash. Kelly Miller saw the explosion and its aftermath in a series of still frames. First he saw Dunham tipping over, his radio headset still on, but his helmet gone. Then Miller saw the sky as he fell over backwards onto the rocket launcher slung from his shoulder. He heard a steady ring like the sound of a hospital heart monitor makes when the patient flatlines. Miller's face hurt and felt hot as if he had a bad sunburn. He tasted blood in his mouth and had the vague feeling he was being shot at. His left arm hurt next. He tried to grab his rifle with his left hand, but nothing happened. He wondered why his arm wasn't working. He looked down to see blood streaming off the fingertips. One piece of hot metal had hit Miller's upper lip, traveled inside his right cheek, and shattered a molar before coming to rest inside of his back cheek. Other fragments peppered around the area around his eyes, left cheek, and forehead. The blast blew out his left eardrum. One piece of the grenade shrapnel went clean through his right tricep, side to side, and punctured the brachial artery. But for some reason it didn't hurt as badly as his upper left arm, which had been hit by 5 or 6 big chunks of metal and sprayed with pebble-sized fragments. The explosion left Sanders, the radio operator, temporarily deaf. He saw Dunham, Miller, and Hampton knocked back by the blast and thought, they're all fucking dead. So, with that, the insurgent that was laying there actually gets up and runs. And Sanders, the radio operator, then unloads on him and kills him. But it's interesting, in the book, it was like Sanders didn't really understand. He was looking for someone else as well. He thought there's no way that whoever was there survived. So he was looking for someone else, another insurgent. And that leaves you, Ferg, kind of trying to organize the Kazovac at this point, right?
Well, yeah, I just went from a 7-man team to 3 Marines getting wounded, sort of almost combat, ineffective. So my main thing was try to set up a casualty collection point around the back, the fence line right there, and get these Marines tended to.
Could you guys? Yeah.
In the book, it says I felt it's accurate, but I could feel the bullets passing me. Mm-hmm. And I was incredibly disoriented, never lost consciousness, but I'm looking down on the ground and I can see the bullets striking. And so I got my rifle with my right arm because it still worked, and I actually knelt at the front of the white Land Rover and tried to hold security one-handed. Mm-hmm. And it felt like an eternity, let me tell you what, but it was probably seconds past and my adrenaline started to wane. And then I actually had to go back. I kept moving back down the line of cars the way we came, because with every passing second, my pain level started to skyrocket, and I actually puked right there at the white Land Rover, and then I made it back behind the red vehicle, and I puked again, and that's when Sanders came up, and he was passing by, and I was in actually so much pain, I asked him to knock me out because I just wanted it to stop. Like I couldn't stop puking because the pain was so bad. And then I think I saw Ferg moving up past me as well, and then Sergeant Reynolds guided me to where the casualty collection point was and just put me up against a wall, the pile of goo I was at this point. And then Hampton joined me. And I remember the thing that I cared about most, and Bill was the same way, I didn't give 2 fucks about myself. I never asked how I was. I never asked how Bill was because I could see him. Where's Dunham? How's Dunham? That was the only thing I could care about, because I could tell, I'm still talking, I can think, I'm fine enough. I could see Bill, he was talking, looking at me, he was going to be okay. But both Bill and I just wanted to know, where was Dunham? How was Dunham? and like that was like a theme almost.